Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo! All right, let's talk about this movie. Guys, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we've got a new movie review, and it's for a movie that I have definitely, especially recently within the last week, I have been waiting to see and eagerly waiting to see, and that is Marvel's Eternals. We have finally gotten this movie, and man, this one has been a long time coming because I'm pretty sure we were supposed to get this movie a lot sooner, and of course, it got delayed a bunch, and here we are now, November 5th, we got the movie. I've finally seen it here, Friday night. What did I think about it? Well, there's a lot to talk about, really, with this movie. I think from everything that I've read before having seen the movie, it sounded like this movie was definitely going to split a lot of people up, and I think for the most part, it's kind of done that job in a way, at least for the critics anyway, which I will mention and talk about because let's just say I'm not exactly on board with the critics, and I do think a lot of the critics that didn't like the movie, I do ultimately will not understand where they thought the movie was ultimately just not working for them. I don't think I'm going to quite understand that because ultimately as of right now, as I look at the reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, from a critic standpoint, the movie has roughly around a 49 to 50%, out of, I think it's around 250 plus reviews from, critics. Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that score. I don't at all. I really don't. I don't think that score is entirely accurate to this movie in any way. And the audience score, as of right now, is sitting at an 83% with a roughly around 10,000 plus reviews from verified, audience audience, like the general audience of moviegoers who have seen the movie, have had their tickets, 10,000 plus reviews, and it's sitting at roughly an 83%. And I think that's a pretty fair score, if I'm being honest. Ultimately, I don't think that's where my score is going to be in the end, but let's just talk about the movie. Ultimately, how did I feel? I liked it. I thought it was alright. I mean, ultimately, I think the general consensus that I'm going to have with this movie down the line, whenever I ultimately end up rewatching it, because I don't think I'm going to rewatch it in theaters. I think I might wait for this one to eventually come out on Disney Plus and, so on and so forth to rewatch again. But Eternals for me is a movie that I ultimately think is going to definitely be on the lower end of the MCU tier list of all the 26 movies that we've gotten so far. And to be clear, I don't think it's the worst. I definitely do not think this is the worst movie. Not even close. I still hold movies like Iron Man 2 and Thor 2: The Dark World as the bona fide worst. And that's not to say that those movies are bad, because ultimately, I don't think there is an inherently bad MCU movie. I don't think they've made a bad one yet. I don't. I think they've made fine to good to great movies. I don't think they've ultimately gone below that, anywhere near below that, to where we get to mediocre or to bad. I think so far they are still 26 for 26 when it comes to the movies. And so far with the shows, I think they're 3 for 3. And that's really, you gotta give your hats off to them for that. I mean, it's crazy to me. And ultimately, again, I liked the movie. I really did. I really thought the movie excelled in a lot of parts, and I also think it didn't quite excel in some parts either. I mean, again, this movie is not a flawless movie. It's definitely not a flawless movie. It's got some critiques that I think ultimately we can kind of point out, and I think ultimately the biggest critique that I've personally seen so far from a lot of people is that the movie is too long and that it is boring. Now, here's what I will say. I agree with one of those takes, and it's not the boring one. I don't think this movie is boring by any means. I don't. This is not a boring movie. I think there is a lot in this movie that ultimately very much intrigued me and made me interested in regards to the expanded lore of what makes the MCU, because ultimately, something that I saw somebody say that in a way I would actually very much agree with is that if you think about it, Eternals is kind of like a history lesson. It's like a movie giving you a history lesson of the entire MCU. And ultimately, I don't know why I keep saying ultimately. Basically, that is the gist of what makes Eternals what it is. It is a movie that breaks down the world of the MCU from the beginning to present day, because a lot of this movie goes back in time and even up to present day and gives you basically a rundown of everything that has happened with these characters who basically sprung the entirety of what makes the Earth what it is now. And I thought that was very interesting. Like, it was the MCU's take on what the Earth was like. Obviously, the MCU is not real life, and they just did their own thing. And I thought that was very interesting. It's very intriguing. It makes me want to learn more. It gave me a lot of questions. Ultimately, not everything was answered, but that's totally fine. That's, for somebody like me, that's perfectly okay. So I thought that was very interesting. Now, with that being said, the one critique I do agree with is that the movie is way too long. And again, that doesn't mean that the movie was boring. I don't think the movie was boring at all. I did not look at my phone once, and I'm ultimately, again, I keep saying ultimately, I am somebody who never looks at their phone in a movie. Even if I want to check the time, I am somebody who never looks at the phone. You never ever should look at your phone. I've seen some people in the reviews who said that they were bored, say that they looked at their phone. Look, if you're bored by a movie, don't look at your phone. Don't look at your phone, man. That just ruins the experience for other people. Seriously, don't ever do that. It's bad movie theater etiquette. I was never bored, but the movie is a little bit too long. It's around 2 hours and 37 minutes. It's the second longest MCU movie. Yeah, I probably would have shaved maybe 15 or so to 20 minutes off. I don't think this movie needs to be as long as it is. I do think there's a lot of scenes, and this is another critique. I do think there are a lot of unnecessary scenes in the movie that kind of drag out a little bit too long and basically give some unnecessary dialogue. Like, there is a lot of unnecessary dialogue in the movie that just, it doesn't necessarily need to be in the film. I think a lot of the dialogue, it doesn't hamper down the vibes of the scenes that it's in. It's just that it's just not necessary. And I think that happens in a lot of scenes. The humor's good. I think the humor from specifically Brian Tyree Henry, who plays a character by the name of Phastos. He's basically the engineer of the Eternals. And Kumail Nanjiani, who plays Kingo. Those two have most of the humor in the movie. And Kingo, played by Kumail Nanjiani, he is hilarious. And he's got like an agent or an assistant of sorts with him. Those two together are what makes the comedy in this movie what it is. It's hilarious. Every time they're on screen, they have some of the best jokes, and I absolutely love that. And also, basically, let's kind of run down all the Eternals. I think for them being newer characters that we've never heard of before or know anything about, I think they did a fine enough job. I mean, you do get some level of character development for every single one of them. There's not a single Eternal in the entire movie that doesn't get some level of character development, and I'm really happy that they went through with that. And I think that's basically another reason as to why the movie was as long as it is, because they had to develop all these characters in enough time to make a long enough movie so that we could understand each one. And so look, again, I understand where some people are coming from. Ultimately, I don't agree with the take that it's boring. I just don't think that the movie is boring. Again, it does have flaws, and I've mentioned a few of them already. So the movie was a little too long. There were a lot of scenes with unnecessary dialogue and just some scenes that just weren't needed. Some people are saying that the acting is dull and that the movie is like very wooden. There's a couple of times in the movie where it does feel that way, but I don't think it happens throughout the entirety of the movie. To say that happens throughout the entirety of the movie, I think is a little bit ridiculous. I don't disagree that there aren't scenes where it feels that way, but I don't think it's throughout the entirety of the movie. I'd say there's maybe about 10% of this movie that does feel that way, but look, I like the movie. I do. I like this movie. I don't think it's bad. I definitely do not agree with the whole aspect that the critics, or at least the 50% of the critics that didn't like it, I don't necessarily agree with them. And I don't think this movie deserves the 50% that, just that number, just saying the number 50% for a movie like Eternals, I don't agree with it. I don't. I think 83% is more closer to where I would agree more with. Ultimately, 83% is not going to be what I give my score for this movie. And I will be doing a spoiler review, so be sure to stick around for that review tomorrow, guys. I will be releasing a spoiler-filled review of the movie tomorrow because there were 2 post-credit scenes as well that, oh man, I so eagerly want to talk about those 2 post-credit scenes because the mid-credit scene, there is not a single fiber of my being that in any way thought that that was going to be the mid-credit scene of this film. I was not in any way, shape, or form expecting that to be what it was. Unfortunately, before seeing the movie, I was sadly spoiled. Unfortunately, because there's some YouTubers out there that feel like putting spoilers in their thumbnails is just totally okay. Even though I wasn't intending to watch the video. I was spoiled for the post-credit scene, which is even cooler. And you're going to like that one. If you haven't seen the movie yet, you're going to like that one. So I'm going to talk about all that in the spoiler-filled review. I kind of wanted to hopefully make this review of the movie a little bit shorter so that with the spoiler-filled review, it'll be a little longer, I think, and we'll talk about the movie more as a whole. But ultimately, guys, and there I go again. I'm saying ultimately. I got to stop using that word. So I think my verdict for this movie is... what is my score? Well, it's not going to be an 83, and it certainly is not going to be a 50. That's for sure. I'm going to go a 7.5. 7.5 out of 10 is my score. Again, this movie is definitely going to be at the bottom of the list as far as MCU movies, but again, that doesn't mean that the movie's bad. It's just at the lower tier of MCU movies that I have seen out of all the 26 that we've gotten so far. So that's my verdict, guys. 7.5 out of 10. That is my non-spoiler filled review. Guys, I appreciate you all tuning into this video. If you like this movie, if you like this review, and you want to see more, please hit that like and subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and comment down below. What did you guys think of the movie? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Let me know your thoughts down below. Keep it respectful as always. Let's have a conversation about the movie. Don't be negative at all. I don't want to hear any of that, all right? Let's be respectful, have a conversation, and talk about this movie. And yeah, I will see you guys all in the spoiler-filled review tomorrow. All right, you guys have a good rest of your night. Peace out.